were reaffirming their covenant with God, and it included bread and wine. If you remember, the Passover was not only a community celebration, but it was a home ritual. So we got two things that we're doing today. For me to do a good job at helping you to understand about the daily offering and what happened on the Day of Atonement, I have to give you kind of two lessons. We're going to break for a few minutes in between, but if you've got your Bible or your phone or a pen or whatever, you're going to need to write some verses down. This is not going to be a sermon. It's going to be more teaching and a walkthrough. Toward the end of each section, I'll open it up for questions. So there'll be plenty of time for that. So, as an introduction, the Bible is full of symbolism, rich symbolism. And the symbolism is used to explain ideas and concepts that might otherwise be difficult, not only for the people of the biblical time, but even for us. And even more so for us because we're removed from that agrarian culture. Unless you are a farmer, most of us don't have anything to do with animals. It's not our livelihood. In biblical times, your animals, your crops, were your food and your income. This is how you stayed alive. This is how you took care of your family. So many of the stories in the Bible, and especially the parables that Jesus taught, have to do with everyday items, everyday situations. Now, there's some symbolism in it, but the people understood it because if you're talking about a sheep, they knew what it was. If you're talking about a ram, they know what it was. So, quick lesson, farm lesson. On my far left there is a ram. A ram is a male sheep. That one's name is Rocky. Rocky the ram. This one here is a female sheep. She's a ewe, an E-W-E. Her name is Big Mama. And you notice that sacrifices go willing, so you got to kind of hold on to them, right? Now, to somewhere up in here, you'll see the little lamb laying down. I don't have a name for the lamb yet. On my far right over there, that's a goat. Now, that particular goat has a red wool cord or ribbon around its neck. And you're going to see in the second part of our lessons today that is the goat for the Lord on the Day of Atonement. This one here is a goat, and you see that the red wool ribbon is around his horns because he is the scapegoat, or in the Bible, the goat for Azazel. It's a word that's only used once in the Bible. We'll look at that later. Now, his name is Skippy the scapegoat, and the fella on the far right, that's Billy Goat. But if you come up with a unique name for the little lamb, let me know, and maybe we can keep that name for the rest of the time. So a sheep are mentioned over 500 times in the Bible. Goats are mentioned about 169 times. So there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of information, a lot of teaching around sheep and goats. We're going to find out today that you may have misunderstood a little bit about Jesus. He's not only your daily lamb, but he's also your scapegoat. We're going to look at Exodus, maybe if we have time, 12, and everybody thinks of the Passover lamb as a sheep, a lamb. But if you read in verse 5, guess what else it says? You could take it from the sheep or the goats. Sheep or the goats. You take a look at it. Exodus 12:5. The animals you choose must be year-old males. That's important, year-old males, without defect, very important. And you may take them from the sheep or the goats. I was a guest at a synagogue dinner near Passover, an Orthodox synagogue, and they were talking about it, and I raised my hand and I said, "So what about this Passover goat, Rabbi?" And he looked at me and I said, "Well, it's in the Bible." He goes, "I never thought about that." And he goes, "You're right." I go, "I'm not trying to one-up you, but that's what the Bible is. It just keeps feeding us and more things." So we're going to first look at a couple of different passages about lambs and goats. Exodus 29, verses 38 through 42, Exodus 29, 38 through 42, Leviticus 16, verses 2 through 15. Now, Exodus 29 is about the Tamid, Tamid, offering, the daily offering. And Leviticus 16 is about these two goats, one for the Lord and one for Azazel, or the King James refers to as the scapegoat. So I want to open your eyes tonight so you can see how if you have a good understanding of the Old Testament, or as Jewish people would say, the Tanakh, if you have a good understanding of that, a lot of the New Testament just kind of unfolds on its own, okay? Kind of unfolds on its own. So let's look at this daily Tamid offering, okay? Daily Tamid offering. Now, just as an aside, what we're talking about tonight is not the 5 Levitical sacrifices of the whole or burnt offering. It's not the meal or grain offering. It's not the thanksgiving or peace offering. It's not the sin offering, and it's not the guilt offering. Those were the special offerings called the 5 Levitical sacrifices. What we're going to talk about first is the daily Tamid offering, whether it was in the tabernacle, Solomon's temple, or the second temple during Jesus' day. There was certain things that happened every day at the temple. And the Tamid offering was that. Okay? So one little aside, Hebrews 10:1. This is why we study the stuff in the back. Hebrews 10:1. The law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the realities themselves. Hebrews 7:27. Unlike the other high priests, he, meaning Jesus, does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He doesn't have to do that. That was the duty of the Levitical priests, but primarily the high priest, kind of the supervisor, watched over all of this. And then 2 Corinthians 5:21. 2 Corinthians 5:21. God had him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. And then the last one, but the ministry of Jesus that Jesus has received is superior to theirs, talking about the high priest and his offerings, as the covenant, the new covenant, of which he is mediator, is superior to the old one, and it is founded on better promises. So that's why we look at this. But if we're going to understand Jesus as high priest, don't you think we need to know something about the high priest in the background? If Jesus is called the sin offering in New Testament, don't we need to know something about the sin offering? If Jesus is called Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us, is what Paul is talking about. Don't we need to know something about Passover and the Passover lamb? So if we understand the old, the new just kind of pops open to us. It really is rich. So this daily to meat offering, I'm just going to go verse by verse, Exodus 29, verses 38 through 42. And tonight, for sake of ease in language, I'm going to use the English Standard Version. If you don't like it, I apologize. There are many versions out there. I chose to use this one tonight. Verse 38. Now this is what you shall offer on the altar. We're not talking about the golden altar. We're talking about the altar of burnt sacrifice that's out in the outer court. It's 7.5 foot by 7.5 foot and about 4.5 foot high. It's made out of bronze. The Hebrew word is actually copper. It's acacia wood that's been wrapped or enclosed in copper to keep it from burning and singeing, because copper dissipates the heat, spreads it out. That's why we like it when we're cooking. It doesn't have a hot spot and burn my eggs all up. Spreads that heat out. So now this is what you shall offer on that altar. 2 lambs, a year old, day by day, regularly, to meat, day by day. 1 lamb you shall offer in the morning, and the other lamb you shall offer at twilight, or in the evening. And with the first lamb, 1/10 of fine flour mingled with 1/4 of a hin of beaten oil, olive oil, and 1/4 of a hin of wine for a drink offering. Those are in there for a reason. So we've got bread, olive oil, and we got wine. 41. The other lamb you shall offer at twilight, early evening, and you shall offer it with a grain offering and its drink offering, which is wine, as in the morning, for a pleasing aroma, a food offering for the Lord. And it shall be a regular burnt offering throughout your generations at the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord, where I will meet with you and speak with you there. So at this brazen altar, every morning and every evening, there were this daily to meat offering. And it's a sheep. We're going to look at it. It's a male, so it's a ram. It was a year old, male, without defect and blemish. Keep that in mind. So this happened every morning. Now let's unpack what that means. Tamid. That Hebrew word means perpetual, continual. Some of the English translations actually talk about a perpetual offering. So the blood of that lamb in the morning and in the evening continued to cover or atone. It was daily. Now this was administered at the temple or the tabernacle during Moses' time. The high priest supervised it every morning and every evening. It was a community offering, and it was paid for by the annual contribution of the half shekel. Remember that half shekel back there in the book of Exodus? What was the half shekel for? It was for the silver sockets, the foundation of the tabernacle. And you know what it's called? Atonement money. Atonement money, that foundation of the tabernacle. Everything was held in place by that foundation, and it was a half shekel. It didn't matter if you were rich, and if it didn't matter if you were poor, everybody's contribution was the same. So a half and a half makes a whole. So there was no one that was any better than anyone else. It required the same thing. Atonement money, redemption money. So that was the silver sockets. Every morning and every evening, here's what the Jewish people were doing. By that daily to meat offering, they were reaffirming their covenant with God. They were reaffirming their covenant with God, and it included bread and wine, or the grain to make the bread, and the wine as a drink offering. That, for me, is a picture of the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper, or communion. And what does Paul say when we receive communion? That we proclaim whose death? His death until when? He comes. What are we doing when we receive communion, whatever your frequency is in your church? You're reaffirming the new covenant in your life. You're reaffirming the relationship you have with God through bread and wine. They just didn't make this stuff up, folks. There was a connection. Now, this daily tamid just gets even better. So the people were reaffirming every morning and every evening their covenant with God. Remember Goliath? When did he come out to taunt Saul's army? Every morning and every evening. Now, why did he do that? Because while they're down there in the valley and they're on these two opposite hills and the Philistines are making fun of Saul and God's people and all of that, he comes out every morning. Why? Because back in Jerusalem, they're offering the daily tamid offering. This is when they're rejoicing and renewing their covenant with God. So when does the enemy come out? When they're trying to pray and renew or reaffirm their covenant with God. He could have come out in the afternoon. I mean, he's a big old slug. I'm sure no one was going to tell him what to do, but he came out every morning and every evening. And the enemy of our soul, you know what? I'll go there. He's not really upset that you're here tonight. He's not. Wait until it's time to give an offering at your church, or wait until it's time for everybody to bow their head and get their heart right with God, or wait until it's for communion. Then watch how distracted everything gets, okay? Now, some of us, we go through it on the way to church, right? I mean, I understand that. But pay attention in your service when you start seeing people get up and babies crying. Nothing wrong with babies. I had a bunch of them, okay? So don't throw rocks at me. But the enemy uses people, right? He stirs us up, especially when we're trying to pray and reaffirm our commitment with God. So every morning, what they are doing is, we're still connected with you, God. And he's going, I still have your back. Covenant's good. Every evening, now I lay me down to sleep. Got you covered through the night. So 2 males, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. No blemish, no defect, 1-year-old, kind of the same as that Passover lamb or goat. 1-year-old, no defect. Okay? So when we brought our offering to the tabernacle or the temple, we didn't bring one with mange under its belly, kind of a broken off ear, a poked out eye, a broke leg or anything like that. This is supposed to be our best. Because this came from where? Not from Walmart. Not from the farmer's market down the street. This was culled from our own flock because this is our currency. This is what feeds our family. This is where we get the leather for our clothes, the wool for our garments. So this is our connection to God. It's our korban. That Hebrew word korban means to draw near. If you draw near him, he will draw near to you. When we're giving offerings at our church, regardless of what kind they are, this is not a bill, folks. It's not a bill. It's the way we draw close to God. If you teach Sunday school, I know you're not making big wages, right? Why are you doing it? It draws you closer to God because this is your service. It's the way you say, thank you, Lord. Thank you. I thank you for my Sunday school teacher when I was growing up. May I be like her. I'm going to try. Okay? If you're bringing flowers to the church, that may be a Thanksgiving offering. If you help maintain the church when stuff's broken, not only are you saving the church money, but sometimes that's the way men draw closer to God. They take their time, their talent, and their treasure and apply it to the house of the Lord. So we give him our best, not what we don't want anymore, not that what we're going to put in the Goodwill box or give to the Salvation Army. We give him our best every morning and evening. Now, here's where it gets a little unique. These lambs, the daily Tamid offering, were only born and raised in one place. Where do you think that was? Bethlehem. Bethlehem is the Hebrew word. Means house of bread. What did Jesus say he was? I am the bread of life. So this Tamid offering was raised near the temple in Bethlehem, and that's all they did. Everything they raised there came about from that half shekel annual offering of everybody, and that supplied for the 2 lambs every day of the year, okay? They were grown in this one place. That's where the shepherds took care of them, all right? Now, the rabbis of that time period, or a little bit after that, used to make fun of the Tamid offering, not when it was being offered, but how they were raised in Bethlehem. They were said to have been treated like royalty. Now, what did the rabbis mean? It's in the Gemara. Look it up. It's just some crazy Jewish writing, but it's got good historical stuff in it. I'm sorry, anybody on YouTube. I'm a character. So they were treated like royalty. How were these lambs treated in Bethlehem that were only used for the temple? Well, they had to be careful not to injure them when they were born. They had to be careful not for them to get any blemishes, because they had to raise this for a whole year, right? So it could be acceptable as an offering at the temple. So when it was born, that's when it kind of is susceptible to injury. So you know what they would do with that little lamb after it was born? They would wrap it in cloth. Guess what those cloths are called in the New Testament? Swaddling clothes. Uh-oh, this stuff's getting close to home. Swaddling clothes, okay? Now, it gets a little bit better with the Tamid offering. I told you the timing was every morning and every evening. Mark chapter 15, verses 22 through 25 tells us the time of the first Tamid offering, that morning one. Mark 15, verses 33 through 39 tell us the time of that second Tamid offering later in the day. So let's look at the timeline of the whole day, one day with the Tamid offerings. At dawn, someone would go to where these lambs are raised and call out a year-old one, get it from the shepherds at dawn, and bring it to the altar. Not sacrificed yet, bring it to the altar. When was Jesus condemned by Pilate or sent to Pilate? In the morning, at dawn. At the 3rd hour, Jewish time, the 3rd hour this morning, probably about like 9 a.m. our time, the 3rd hour on the Jewish calendar, the first Tamid offering, that morning offering, was sacrificed. Mark 15:25 says Jesus was crucified at the same time the daily morning Tamid offering was being offered up. The 6th hour on Jewish time is when the second lamb was taken to the altar. They went to the farm, so to speak, to Bethlehem to get the Tamid offering for the second one that day. And So it's starting to get a little dark. Mark 15:33 says at that time when Jesus was crucified, what happened? Darkness came over that area. The 9th hour, so 3 hours later, the second lamb was sacrificed. So when it was getting dark on that afternoon when Jesus is being crucified, that's when they go to the lamb farm and they bring the second to mead. At the 9th hour, that's when that afternoon, evening to mead offering was offered up and sacrificed. Mark 15:34 indicates that's when Jesus died. Same time. Now, the to mead offering, if it's Passover, still happens. And there's an adjustment made for the Passover offering, okay? But this to mead offering, every morning, every evening, happened 365 regardless. So Jesus, the Lamb of God, born in Bethlehem, the house of bread, who takes away the sins of the world, was born in the same town as the temple sacrifices. Not on the farm, okay? But he was born where? In a stable. Where, okay, you kind of get it, right? A lot of stuff there. So Jesus, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, became your continual, your perpetual, your forever to meat offering. So we're going to take just a few minutes break. If you wanted to grab something else to drink or you wanted to throw a question at me, hard questions, this man right here will answer. Easy ones, his wife will answer, and I'll referee, okay? Any questions about what I just said before we go in a little bit on with the scapegoat and all that?
I'm a little nervous. I heard that Jesus was born in a cave, not a stable.
Yes, there is some to that too. That it was more of a cave type area instead of what we think about a stable, and instead of a food trough, there was an indention in the ground where they may have thrown grain. So there is that belief too.
Was the meat offering completely burned or was part of it eaten?
This was a whole burnt offering. This one, no one benefited from it, from my understanding. Now, some of the other offerings, a portion would go to the priest. Now, by the time of the Second Temple, things got a little corrupt, and some of the high priests actually bought their office. And it's been told in some history books that Caiaphas, the high priest at the time Jesus was crucified, actually had his own like little enterprise of raising temple offerings. So things had got corrupt. Even Jewish scholars believe that the Second Temple may not have even had the Ark of the Covenant actually in the Holy of Holies, and that the temple functioned more or less like a religious bank. It was just very corrupt.
Also, this was established in Deuteronomy, so the people did this while they were in the wilderness.
Right.
What happened when they were traveling? Did they just not do it, or did they stop and perform this? If the tabernacle's not up, but would they still perform the offering?
I have no idea because I don't know. I mean, we can see in the Bible that they moved, but those details aren't given. But the way the command is, that fire in the altar was to never go out. In Leviticus 9, God lit it, and then it was up to the people to keep it stoked and cleaned and ashes and all that out. So, but I'm sure someone in the Talmud probably has argued what happens, but I don't know. We do know that there was a period, especially during the captivities, where people probably not only were they far away from Jerusalem and the temple, things fell into disrepair, even lost God's book, the scrolls, and then Ezra reinstituted things. So, yes.
There were so many offerings, sacrifices. Numbers, there's just a whole list of sacrifices, right? In animals.
More Leviticus.
Is it Leviticus?
Yeah.
Okay, Leviticus. That so many were sacrificed, animals were sacrificed. That just weeding out the animals, I'm just like,
Well,
I mean, it's just constant
the daily
for every sin.
The daily Tamid happened every day, but people weren't going to the tabernacle or the temple, every family or tribe, every time they sinned. It's kind of like us today, But of course, we got it easy. We can just turn and we don't have to bring an animal. But the time that people were commanded to, there was like 3 celebrations or pilgrimages, and there is some historical stuff in the Talmud of how many lambs would have been sacrificed for Passover, and some say it could have been up to 230,000. And I talked with a rabbi, and in the Talmud it was like an assembly line with it to get it done in that period of time, and those people could take that back home. If you remember, the Passover was not only a community celebration, but it was a home ritual. You gathered your household and your neighbor, if they didn't have anyone, and you would, back in Exodus, there was the Passover lamb. So it got moved to the temple because there's finances involved, okay? So there are a lot of things in the Bible, if you read them, they really were a home celebration or a home event, and through the course of time, especially once the temple was established and all the rites and rituals and the priesthood and all of that, it kind of became a business, which is most likely why Jesus felt necessary to cleanse the place.
Over here. I may have missed it. How did the Tamid offering differentiate from the Passover offering? I was always taught that Jesus died on the Passover offering, but it sounds like it was the Tamid, or were they both the same thing at that?
No, the Tamid offering is separate, but because that's only, so when Jesus would have died, that would have been one lamb, just one lamb, because that was kind of representing the whole community. This volley of people coming in with Passover lambs was a separate event. So this other one can be taken care of in the midst of all these other Passovers going on.
So on the Passover day, they could have had both of those offerings, the Passover offering and the Tamid offering.
Yes.
On the same day.
Well, very close. Some say they were only about by the time the last, by the time of the Tamid offering, within an hour after that, some calculate, is when the Passover offering would have been lifted up.
Okay, thank you.
The last one. So a lot of that information is in the Talmud. You have to weed through mounds of reading. And then there's rabbis arguing back and forth, What do you have when you have, how many opinions do you have when you have 2 Jewish people together? 3, because one of them's going to argue with himself. A rabbi told me that, so YouTube, I'm sorry. Okay,
Any more questions?
Okay, let me get a drink of water, and then we're going to shift. Oh, right here. Remember, if it's a hard question, your husband has to answer.
I'd heard that even the timing of
I can't hear you.
even the timing of Palm Sunday when he was going in on the donkey, that there was something that was normally done then, and why the people were rejoicing and saying that. And what I'm hearing is that there's more than just a little bit here and there, that it's done exactly on time according to what Jesus did and what he lived. And so it's even more than what we would think about.
If you read the Gospel of John and the 7 I Ams, those weren't just picked out of the air. Many of those sayings and what's happening in the temple is directly related to one of the I Ams that he's saying, one of the feasts or something that's going on in the temple. So that's why I find the Torah, especially Exodus and Leviticus, for some, Leviticus is the most boring book in the Bible. In fact, when I used to work midnights loading semis, and I'd get home in the morning, I would listen to the King James Version of the Bible by Alexander Scrubby. And if I listen to Leviticus, I'm out. I'm out. And now Exodus and Leviticus are my 2 favorite books of the Bible. God has a sense of humor.
Amen. Okay,
Yes,
we got
one over
more
here.
question.
What she was talking about the week before when Jesus went in on the donkey, wasn't that when they brought the lambs into Jerusalem?
I don't know. I've read something. My mind is foggy. Yeah, you could be correct. Okay. So someone came up to me before we started and asked if, it was this guy right here, asked what kind of wood this was. In the Bible, the furniture that was overlaid with gold was made out of acacia wood. That's not acacia. I made it out of maple, so it's pretty good wood. But I have actually, coming in from the Dominican Republic on Monday, there was a craftsman down there who built me 3 arks without the cherubim out of acacia wood, and he carved everything so it's not molding that was done by a machine. And when you do this kind of work, you partner with people. So there's a lawyer near Atlanta, Georgia, that wants an ark, and he wanted it specifically out of acacia wood. And during the pandemic, I ordered a bunch of 24 karat gold leaf, not imitation, but actually gold leaf. Got it dirt cheap because everybody was broke and needed money. And my dad taught me to save money for when you need it. And so I got it. And so I'm working out a deal with him. Ship them to my house. I get one. I'll go leaf yours, and then we'll fight over the third one who gets that. So it'll be there Monday. So if you want to see what acacia wood looks like, there's many varieties. But what's important about the acacia wood is the Bible, King James, I believe, talks about it as incorruptible wood. It's kind of God's pressure-treated wood because it is a very dense grain, but the oils in it repel bugs. They won't eat it.